So last night I had a talk to the boys at the club about nationalism, and more specifically it was the application of nationalism and how our scene and our body at the moment, referring to lads and all the other groups that are associated with Australian nationalism and even around the world, especially in America, they might have the mental philosophical understanding of nationalism, but what we are lacking in the nationalist scene is the application of nationalism. So although there's a lot of processes that need to be undertaken for our organization in terms of growing it and getting new members, the members that we currently have may be philosophical nationalists but not practicing nationalists. And what I talked about was that many normies in our society I would consider more spiritually and physically nationalistic in their application than most nationalists. And this is a fact, because if we are not applying the principles that we profess, then we're hypocrites. And a goal of all nationalists should be that focus on self-improvement, on education, on training, and employment, so that they're not needs, but at the same time their personal health, their spiritual, moral health as well. And what you will find is there are a lot of tradies, and there's a lot of working class Joes out there that are fit, that are healthy, that are improving their lives, that have a missus, that have kids, and they've got some sort of progression happening in their lives for the greater good of society. Now, they might not have this deep political understanding of how our society is sick and rotten, and that working hard and paying taxes is actually aiding and abetting our enemy. But I don't want this political truth to be the fallback position of young nationalists as to why they're not successful and why they're not working on themselves. If you truly believe in nationalism or fascism, you must understand that the fascist or the axe is only as strong as each individual that builds it, and that focus on the individual to build society is one of the key principles and key tenets. And a lot of people, I think, are on board with this in our movement, but again, not applying it. The other thing that I talked about, which I'm not going to go too long-winded about because I probably talked about it too much yesterday, is the economic war that's against us. And that is that the current way of life and the current way of living is a way of living that will result in the ethnic replacement of our people. So it's not just that there's this grand conspiracy against us, whatever conspiracy we want to align ourselves against, but simply that the economic policies of this country, whether it be the taxation, the mass migration, coupled with the low interest rates, coupled with foreign investment, coupled with the property investment of the boomer culture and all this negative gearing and everything, creates such a economic unviability of having a family. And to run through the economics of having a family in this day and age, it actually boggles the mind how expensive it is unless you are willing to go with less. And we must accept as nationalists that our everyday lives are going to have to change for us to succeed. And we're going to have to live off less. We're going to have to live in smaller spaces and have less material goods and materialism, and live a more minimalistic and fiscally conservative life in order to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Because not every single one of us is going to be earning $100 or $150 or $200,000 a year that is basically necessary these days in order to have a decent house in a decent suburb and raise a few kids. That's basically the cost due to after tax, the mortgage repayments, etc., etc., etc. The last thing that we spoke about last night at our social meeting, I would call it, because we didn't have that many people attend, so we just sort of really had a chat, was we talked about inner woods, so to speak. We talked about the idea of collectivist farming, and the idea of forming a commune, so to speak. It does sound very communistic, but in the early stages of fascism, or the early stages of any sort of social and political rejection of the sick society, it's going to look quite communistic. The end goal is obviously to create a society that's parallel to the current one, that has the huge independency and you know, steers away from those hyper socialistic and hyper capitalistic principles, with still maintaining things like property rights and all this sort of stuff, which are the cornerstones of our society. But what we did talk about was moving out, and we talked about, you know, the pipe dream and how we would acquire all the certain resources, and, you know, how we look after water and sewage and gas and electricity and all this sort of nonsense, and what exact area we would be moving to. But the most important thing to take away from this discussion was the idea of building a micro community with a micro school, with micro transactions, so to speak, our own little economy, similar to that of the Orania project, and having something like that in the future run simultaneously with our suburbia, our outer suburbia, I should say, within the capital cities, as like a Lads 1.0 kind of feeder group into, you know, to get people from suburbia to move into our little pocket of light in the chaos of future dystopian Melbourne or Sydney or wherever it is, and then use that as a launching point to move people across into our future city-state. And this is some big brain shit. We're looking at 50-year plan sort of stuff, but it's a good little pipe dream to talk about, and the process of which we would do it. Now, the most important thing that was discussed lastly was that we need to very soon, and this is why I'm doing this video as well, is start looking at our online presence. We need to start promoting our page. We need to get the guys together with the video footage, and the guys that are comfortable, footage of them training or sparring or whatever it is, and get these kind of videos pumping, and get guys motivated in terms of getting down to the clubhouse, and getting some people that are in our scene interested in getting involved in the project. Because if people don't know that we exist, I mean, at the moment it's basically just word of mouth. So we need to have an online public presence, and this is the next evolution of our movement. Without it, we're going to just continue to tread water, which is basically what we're at the moment. We're treading water. We're just maintaining ourselves. We've proved that it's possible to do what we're doing, but now it's time to step into the next gear and escalate into a new phase of Lad Society and of our project. So what's to come from the future of this movement is the online presence to build up the physical network and the physical organization. We're looking at including more sort of socialization days, whether it be movie nights, poker nights, you know, more camping, more going out in the bush and stuff like that. Also looking at what was the other thing that was discussed? I think it's very important that we have our seminars and stuff like that continuing to run, but also we're going to be doing things like barbecues and stuff for the fight night to get people more involved, and looking into moving the clubhouse from where it is for when the lease expires to a better area, a little bit more central, most likely Oakley or Chadstone or you know, south of Burwood, around that kind of central eastern areas that are a little bit south. For the guys that said I'm Melbourne, that won't make any sense to you, but looking at moving that when the lease expires, looking into location stuff around there, and picking our niche market, picking our niche areas that we know are going to help expand the club. And one of them is things like the fight night and the boxing, and you know, that is a big element of why guys want to get involved, and having those selective nights, because not everyone's going to come down every single night. Guys are going to want to come down on the night that suits them. So that's something that we really need to focus on. And then on top of that, it will be coupled, this sort of promotional material will be coupled with ideological presentation and talks like this, not in this fashion, but more doctrinal talks posted up onto the page, talking about the project, talking about where we're going with it in a kind of normie speak, to encourage normies to get involved, because, and this is another thing that was brought up at the meeting, the masses of our movement is not going to be the super red pill, the super, JQ aware, Stormfront 1488 blokes. That's not going to be the masses of our movement. The masses of our movement is the disgruntled, white, male, young population that doesn't feel like they have a community and want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and are somewhat aware of this racial displacement and the failures of this multi-culti system and state. And that's where we're going to get the masses of our movement from. And as long as our movement and organization is hierarchical, in a sense that the leadership team is 100% completely on board with how to solve this problem, because again, it's not so much important how much you know about the Holocaust or anything of that sort. What's important is, what are your ideas to solve this problem? And that's what I want all of our discussion and all of our focus and all of our pipe dream working towards, not just an echo chamber and a circle jerk about who knows more about nationalism or who knows more about history. Let's use that history and apply it. How are we going to solve the problem? And what success will look like for us in the early days is the growing of this project to be a little pocket of light that is well known and well represented and has an excellent optics, an excellent image, so that no matter what the media or the left try to do to denounce us, the average Australian, the average normie goes, yeah, like the media calls them Nazis or white supremacists or white separatists or white segregationists or whatever, but we live in a multicultural society. Why can't there also be an Aussie community? Why can there only be non-Aussie communities? And maintaining that optics of the fence sitters going, well, I might not agree with them, or I might not be able to get down there, or I might not actually give a fuck about what they're doing, but certainly I don't have an issue with what they're doing. And I think that's a really important thing, is to maintain this relationship with the normies is very important for our optics. Not to sound like an optics cuck, but the reason why Nelson Mandela is such a powerful political idol in Western society, even though one minute he's singing kill the Boers and kill the white man and chase them down and spear them and all this sort of stuff, the next minute he's talking about peace and love and diversity and multiculturalism and all this to the mainstream media. And the average white normie around the world thinks Nelson Mandela was a top bloke. And so we kind of need to do the same thing. It doesn't matter how extreme or how radical we are inside our own circles. We need to maintain this really good public presence so that we're undefeatable at an ideological level when our project is completely 100% public, which it will be in due course. So take care and have a think about those things.